if you have built the product, so that is one is the idea. If you have built the product, then I think the question is, are people using it regularly? Are they building on it regularly? Are they engaging and suggesting you features? At a certain stage, I remember in Demisto, it started to say is where people were saying, can I do this with the product? Can I do this with the... Because basically at that point of time, you have unleashed customers' creativity on top of your product, which means they are enjoying it, they are using it, they are loving it.
Awesome. First of all, Rishi, thank you so much for joining us on the Founders Playbook series. We know we've been planning this for a long, long time, and this one's going to be a very exciting episode. Rishi, going directly into the pod, I think you've been a second-time founder, been an operator for the longest time, built out some amazing companies, and on a new journey now with Descope. To start off with, we'd love to learn a little bit more about those early days. You've had a long operator career before jumping into the founder's shoes, right? The early days, I think you were probably doing product management even before product management was really hot. And how was those early days? Like, what was product management like in the early 2010s? I think that era, maybe a decade ago.
You just disclosed my age, but that's okay. I think that's actually a good point. I think product management careers and the whole definition of product management has changed over the years, as it should. The early days of product management still, I would say, had the still similar characteristics. Like I would say my first product management role was at a company called Solid Core Systems in security space. And the first meeting I had with the CEO when I became the product manager was like, product manager is the CEO of the product. Yeah. That was the definition, which has still continued. Some companies hold that true, others don't, but everybody believes that is the goal. And I believe product managers should think of themselves as the goal. Now, how were the days? I think the interesting thing about being a product manager, and some of the listeners here I'm sure have experienced, is, and same as being the CEO or a founder of a product, it's the same story, which is you have way more responsibility than control. What I mean by that is it's on paper you own everything, but then you are going to each person, each department, each employee to say, did you do your job? Did you do your work? And pull that together. So that were the things, right? I mean, but also a lot of fun, because I believe product management is one role where if you are technical, but want to understand the entire life cycle of the business, that's the role. You have the biggest, broadest view of how a business runs, how a product is made. So that's the most fascinating thing about the product management career.
Is that something that you jumped into accidentally, or how did you discover, okay, hey, product management is something that I want to do?
Yeah, so I don't think I thought I'll do it as be a product manager. The way it started was I joined the startup, Solid Core Systems. I was their second engineer, built their first version of the product. It was a very technical product, built kernel drivers for Linux, Windows drivers. And then after we released the product to customers, as it should be in a startup, and I strongly believe as an engineer, I was meeting customers, I was talking to customers, and already playing what is called a typical sales engineer role, right? I mean, this was one of the model where everybody does everything. So playing the sales engineer role, and one day in my one-on-one with the CEO says, Rishi, we need somebody to define the next set of features. So you are it. You are the product manager. It's like, okay, what does a product manager mean? By the way, we didn't have any product manager. So that's where my question is like, you basically spend less time building, more time understanding the customer pain point and defining what to build. So it was more of like a slow progression, because I built the product, then we went and sold the product to early customers. Says, now that you have met customers, you're really good with customers, go be the product manager. That's how I ended up being a product manager.
And over the years, when you've now been on the other side hiring tons of product managers, has something changed over the years in terms of the skill set of what you look for in a product manager? There are lots of myths, right? In between, you heard about product manager need to have an MBA, they need to come from a tech background. But then we saw lots of companies where that wasn't true, right? So what are some, maybe if you could define it in top 3 skill sets that you look while you're on the other side looking for product guys?
So that one is an interesting question, Sahas. I think I feel the right product manager and the skill set depends on the product, depends on the stage of the company. For example, a product manager for an early stage founder, early stage startup needs to be extremely different than a product manager for, let's say, a Palo Alto Networks where we work, right? Why? Because product manager for a founder needs to keep a lot of the things they would learn from MBA, from other aspects behind, and needs to put themselves in the shoes of the customer, and customer meaning the operator. And their focus at that early stage is how can each feature make my life easy? How can each feature work the best for the customer? And then as you grow, and if you're running a bigger business, if you're a product manager of a larger company, then of course that's important. But now you need to look at is like, if I build this, 80% of the customers need this, 20% need this, and the 20% don't address. But in the beginning, there's 100% you have to figure out. But in that 100% customers, you need to figure out what feature is most important for 100%. So the prioritization changes, the way you think changes. As you work for a larger and larger product, you need to have understanding of what is the operating margin, what is my COGS. All those things come in later, but I think I've seen mistakes made where a lot of product managers who think aspects of, oh my God, the UI needs to be this is the experience, and they start to put in too early in the life cycle of a product. You really need to care what matters at that stage of the company. And like as a early stage company product manager, what matters is to win the first 10 customers. And winning the first 10 customers by building the right product, which will then quickly expand, is critical. And that's, by the way, this is why I think most of the early stage companies, founder is the product manager needs to be right hand of the founder, however you say it. But then all these skills from MBA to understanding COGS, to understanding operating margin, understanding marketing aspects of it, right messaging, they become in handy as the company grows.
Got it. So you're saying different skill sets for different stages of the company, and then it comes down to an individual, right? You might be better suited for that 0 to 1 journey. Maybe you enjoy that more. Maybe your skill set is a little more defined for that, or you might be great at the later stage. So it comes down to
and I've seen, by the way, great product managers on both sides. Some actually go cross, some don't, and it's skill set, what you enjoy, and I think also different types of work starts to play in at different stages of the company. Typically, skill set wise, since you asked very specifically skill set, the other aspect is touched upon what the product is. Now, if you're building for developers, that product manager is very different. If you're building for a sales audience, that product manager is very different, because you need to really be filling the shoes of the persona. So if you're building for a developer where your product is 80% SDKs, 20% APIs, and remaining 0% is UI, then that's a very different persona. Okay. Versus if you're building a product where the sales or the marketing is the persona, where they need the UI, where they need the onboarding, that persona is very different.
Absolutely agree. I think what has happened is everyone just applying a textbook approach to it. But if you think of it, it's very practical. Like you said, figure out the spaces you're interested in, build a skill set that is naturally fit to it, and you will eventually land into a product role. It is not something that has been defined right out of college, right? It's like
I think there are certain characteristics that you could pick up, right? I mean, I believe if you feel that product management is the right career for you, there are skill sets that you can build. One, this whole philosophy of understanding how things work is critical. Like, you need to be really curious to understand how things work on every aspect, whether whether it's the technical aspect, whether it's the business aspect, that curiosity and the 5 whys behind it is critical. Being excited about new products, you need every product manager needs to be excited, whether it's the new Apple launch, whether it's the new OpenAI or the hardcore technology, you need to feel, because as a product manager, one thing you're doing is you're building something new, and you need to have that passion for building new, excitement for building new. And these are the soft skills. Hard skills is, I think, from my perspective, uh, most product managers need to have some technical background in today's world, especially if you're in the technology space, right? Because even if you're building a product for the sales persona, when you go to an engineer to earn the credibility from that engineer, when you define a feature, you need to be able to say, engineer says, this is too hard. You need to be able to sit down and is like, okay, why is this hard? Can I modify the feature in a way to still deliver the same value, but it's not hard? So some technical background is critical.
Well, thanks for defining that. I think even if you've not studied it, at least have that curiosity, like you mentioned earlier, to pick up these skills, right? Today, there's so much of this information available online. It's just that intent is needed for you to just, put in those extras. No, that makes sense. We'll definitely talk about lots more about product as we progress through. But one thing that I was really interested in, from the operating experience, I think you grew on the career lines and then shifted into building your first startup with Demisto, right? So how did that happen? Where did the idea for Demisto come through? Was it always at the back of your mind that you wanted to start something, or was it okay, hey, in the conversation you saw an opportunity? How did that?
So I've always been team first, idea later. So I think it was, I want to build something. I want to do a startup. And I think the reasoning was, I was doing very well in my career. I think the big transition was that I felt like if you start as a founder, you have way more freedom to create compared to a large company. Large companies absolutely want to innovate, but there is a lot of barriers that come around when you start to build a new product in a large company. And face that at McAfee, a lot of those barriers. Met my founding team because we had acquired that company into McAfee. And over time, over a few years of working with them, it became apparent that we want to work together. We enjoy each other's company. Slavik and I had a lot of coffees together, sitting next to each other in two offices, as we had a good coffee earlier before the podcast. So we learned to enjoy each other's company, brainstorm on a lot of different ideas, and that's why we said we want to do something. And then I think we had an idea to do something, but I'm a firm believer that build something that your customers want. That's the key to success for a startup. So it wasn't about our idea. Then we went around and says, what would you want? Does this work for you? Is this valuable to you? And the customer said, no, that's not valuable, but I have this other problem. Can you solve this other problem? And then we went through a series of 45 interviews in like 3 weeks. And we came up with a completely different idea, solving that problem, saw the opportunity in the market. So it was, I say it was a continuous customer discovery to figure out what works, evolve the idea to that, and then deliver that.
And is that the same approach that you would suggest to any other founder starting? Like, is that a playbook that you've seen repeatable across, founders around you, and maybe you starting up with Descope? Is that the same playbook that you've been applying?
I think definitely I recommend that. I think all the books and all the material out there have positioned that or preached that as pivot, lean startup, whatever you call it. And again, I will not tie these buzzwords to it. But the point is, you need to really understand your customer. You need to really be self-aware of whatever you are trying to sell and trying to build. Is that really what your customer wants? Are they going to pay for it? Is this their highest pain point? So I would recommend everybody to follow that process. And I follow that process even today in Descope. We're constantly evolving, learning with every customer interview. We document every customer interview in a Google Doc, go through that whole learning through it, finding what did they say, what is the intent. Like, it's not just what they said. Why did they feel this way? What is the intent behind this? Do they care about this? Do they not care about this? And you got to almost learn to read their mind and understand why are they asking this. So strongly recommend this, and then you need to continue to pivot your product towards that. And lots of products have pivoted drastically towards that. Lots of products have pivoted slowly towards these things. Some before raising, some before starting the development, some after. But I think the bottom line is the successful companies build something that their customers will want and have a pull from the market, rather than you convincing the customer of what you want to build. And that's the big difference here. You shouldn't go and say, no, I have this amazing idea, you should use it. It's like, what's your pain point? Can I solve that pain point?
100% agree. In looking back in the retro, you mentioned in Demisto as well, you all were going through multiple ideas till you hit one that you went deeper into. What were some metrics where you knew you were getting that pull from the market, and how did you decide, okay, hey, this is something that we really want to double down and continue building?
Yeah, I think it's that's an excellent question. I think this is always the metrics in a startup stage, and how regimented and dogmatic you are about metrics is always an open debate. But I think certain things you will. I think it's one of those where you will feel if you have a pull. But the metrics that you look out for are one, when you pitch that idea, do you move to the next stage? And the next stage is the customer says, can we start a POC? Can we get a demo of the product, right? Versus in other cases, you'll say, interesting, I like the idea, but I have a more urgent problem. Yeah. The more urgent problem is a sign that they may be interested, but this is not top of the mind. So I think you need to eventually see what's the reaction. Do you move to the next stage? So you can easily say, hey, I do 30 pitches, and out of that, am I getting 3 move to the next stage? Am I getting 10 move to the next stage? Yeah. That's one metric, which is, do they move to the next stage? And I think I'm keeping it next stage rather than a POC or demo, because it could be completely different. The next stage, maybe I need to go back and pull another person from my team, because you may not have nailed your persona yet. Maybe the product is good, but who you're pitching to is not right. But the question is how fast you move to the next stage. Second, I think if you have built the product, so that is one is the idea. If you have built the product, then I think the question is, are people using it regularly? Are they building on it regularly? Are they engaging and suggesting you features? At a certain stage, I remember in Demisto, it started to say where people were saying, can I do this with the product? Can I do this with the... Because basically at that point of time, you have unleashed customers' creativity on top of your product, which means they are enjoying it, they are using it, they are loving it. And I think that to me is the right stage. Like, product market fit is of course defined by, hey, is there sales, is there self, like people are, you have a pull from the market. But for me, an important signal is whoever agreed to use the product, are they getting value? Are they engaging? Are they suggesting? And if they are, then it could be that you need to find more of those people, and that's your product market fit. It doesn't need to be like, so there is two things. Is the product right, but is the market also right? And market, I mean your audience, your customer.
Nice. That's a very interesting way to look at it, right? I think what you did mention is product market fit might look different for different companies. So it is up to you. There isn't one single metric that maybe, I cannot ask you, okay, hey, is there a benchmark for product market fit? But what you rightly said, is it a gut feeling? Do you get to know? Or
yeah, you do get to know. But I think what I'm still pointing out, I think one important thing is, in most of the talks on product market fit, and I don't know how people interpret it, but when I interpret it, is like people are saying, change the product till you get the product market fit. What I'm saying is, in the product market fit, you have product and you have market. And market is your set of customers, and you can change your market. rather than changing your product too. Or you can change both. The idea is, do you get the right match for that customer base? So that's what I'm saying. And yes, there is a gut feel, but you'll start to see the same pitch works. The pitch works, the demo works, those people respond back to you, they move to the next stage. And you can put in metrics on those as well.
No, that's interesting. One other common question that we often see founders are being asked about, especially product managers turning into founders, is they fall in love with the idea of building, right? Inherently been building products. But they fall into certain small traps, maybe. Is the market big enough? Especially when you mention product and market. I think as product managers turning founders, they're probably great at building products. But then the question arises, okay, hey, is the market big enough? Is that something that you suggest them to start thinking about early on in their journey? Or do you believe that, okay, hey, the market opens up and they can land in?
I think, no, I would want to keep an eye on that for sure from early on. I think it's not it's a parameter to consider and think about, may not be the decision maker solely in the beginning. The reason why it's an important parameter to think about is because you can find yourself in a trap that you build something amazing, but it's a very small subset of people who are going to use it. And in that case, that may be a very different business, not investable, hard to raise money for, maybe still a good product, good fit. And you can imagine lots of products, like, take examples. I'll take like random example. Karaoke track machines. There's like, people have built so many apps with karaoke tracks. How much is the market? How many people do karaoke? And even if everybody in the world does karaoke, they do it once a year. So is that an interesting market? Is that a big enough market? I don't know. Right. So you can build the best karaoke thing, but how much are you going to make as a company, even if you get 50% of people in the world to use your product? How much are they willing to pay? So yes, I think how big is the market is an important thing. But I think sometimes it's also important when you think of the market size, you could be thinking about what are the adjacent markets. So some of the new categories, when you're starting to define a new category, there is no market size. How do you calculate a market size? You're not going to find data. But then you look at it as like, if I build this, I'm solving this one problem. If I extend to an adjacency, I'll solve the other problem. If I extend this, I'll solve this other problem. Now you have a market. And you can back into what is the market. So yes, think about the market in the beginning. You can choose to be very narrow as far as you have a path to adjacent problems.
Got it. This is something I'm going to go deeper with you while we talk more about Descope, and we'll break it down further. Just before we jump in, I think one thing we have to mention is I think you had a fantastic exit with Demisto, right? Lots of questions around it for sure, because we'd love to go deeper, but I'll limit it to one for now. Is this something that you think was something that you could have planned for? Did it come through? Can you walk us through a little bit more on how?
No, I think I don't know what's the popular opinion. I actually very strongly believe never plan for an exit. Whether it's an acquisition, whether it's something else, don't plan for an exit. I think plan for building the best product for your customer and go after big customer base. Planning for an exit results in a lot of unnatural decisions. I have seen people saying, no. I think my target acquires are these two companies, and hence I'm going to create an integration into those two companies and try to sell them. Wrong way to think about it, because if you were successful in that path, now you are hostage to those two companies that if they don't acquire you, you have nowhere else to go. Of course, you can do those integrations and those tie-ins with the goal of getting more customers and reaching more customers. But with the goal of getting acquired, you will make unnatural decisions. So you cannot plan for it. And we did not. I mean, Demisto was an amazing journey in the sense that we raised our Series C. We were growing like crazy. And 3 months later, 4 months later, we were acquired. We did not raise $43 million to get acquired 3 months later. Our plan was to grow. But it happened. I think it was an amazing experience. The product found an amazing place. That is the leading product in the SOAR market now. And Palo Alto Networks did an excellent job with the product to grow it. So it found very good home, amazing outcome. But no, we didn't plan for it at all.
Good. So congratulations. I think that is definitely inspiring. Rishi, I think oftentimes in behind the successes, I think one thing that is very less spoken about is the journey isn't a linear path, right? It isn't. We see the successes outside, but were there any anecdotes from the past or anything that you think about now that you think you might have done differently while building Demisto? Any learnings from there that you are currently applying at Descope?
I think in general, I do retrospects, but don't know regrets. I think that's how I take life. Yes, there are learnings, but also I think this is a difficult one because the scenario, the times, the situations are different in each company. But yes, of course, there are looking back. They will always find I could have done this better. I could have went and focused on this particular aspect of the product earlier. I could have focused on this particular aspect of the go-to-market earlier. But I think in general, I would say the Demisto journey was very good because I think a lot of the learnings that I had, we applied right then rather than wait for 3 years and for the next one. Some of the things that I could say is there were learnings on the hiring front. How you hire, what do you think of hiring as your early sales?
What were some of these learnings?
Yeah, so for example, I think one of the big things to really consider for founders is how do you do your early sales hiring? What is the right persona for the early sales person that you hire? What is the metric that you put on the early salesperson hire? What are the expectations there?
What would some of these be?
So for example, I truly believe that you need, again, within context, you need to see, can I afford that sales hire? Do I have the product market fit? But I believe the founder needs to be close to the sales for as long as possible without hurting the business, which means you do need to do first few deals yourself, understand the persona, understand the buyer, understand the product, and then go hire the right people at the sales time. Also, don't hire a head of sales who's not an individual sales rep. Hire an individual sales rep who can go close deals because there's always learning to be done, the message to be tweaked. Hire your first sales rep to be more product focused or closer to the value prop rather than a business seller. And these are all B2B context selling. So those are some of the learnings. And I think that's, I think, I would say from a sales hiring perspective, an important aspect to keep in mind.
Awesome. Rishi, one of the questions that I always had was you've done 2 startup journeys now in the operating side for the longest bit. What has been your hardest hire? Has it been the sales folks? Has it been design folks? Has it been product folks? And why were they the hardest?
Yeah, I think for me, sales hiring is the toughest, always the toughest. And I think the reason is I can put a pattern on a strong product person for a certain role, a strong designer, strong engineer based on characteristics. You can interview for that. When it comes to sales hiring, salespeople hiring, it's very hard. I've seen some great salespeople, completely different personas, right? One would be really good with technical product understanding, how they engage with the customer. And the other salesperson could be really good with just being personable, just engaging with the customer and not understand the product at all. And then we'll bring the right resource from within the company. So I think I have really, I really believe there is no one thing that can define a strong salesperson, especially for the early stage. At a later stage, of course, they're characteristic, they're organized, there is discipline, there is tracking, there is metrics, which all great salespeople I have met with for a later stage of the company. But this early stage sales hiring is very difficult, and I've always struggled with that.
Interesting. So, folks, if any of y'all are from the sales domain, think you've been doing some amazing stuff and you like what Descope's doing, you know what to do and who to reach out to. But that probably takes us into what you've been building recently with Descope. First, off the top of my mind, I think founder journeys are hard. You've done one. What really prompted you into jumping in the second time, and why Descope, right? Why did the idea, or how did the idea of Descope come through?
Yeah. So I think why again? I think that's a good one, and the answer is we are crazy enough. No, but I think in all trueness, I think the reality is all the founders, all of us really enjoyed working together. We enjoyed creating something new and taking it through the adoption. That challenge, that feeling of achieving hard stuff is what drove us. And not that there are no hard things to build or do in a large company, but I think when it comes to starting from scratch, the empty slate that you start with, where you can define something from the beginning, what market, what product, what is unique about your product, how does the customer use your every aspect of it, right? So that's what excites us, which is going. Why Descope? I think the answer is similar to what happened at Demisto. It's not that we woke up and says we are gonna go revolutionize customer identity. We said, what are the problem spaces? Let's talk to people. Let's survey the market. Let's understand. So we went through a very, call it like a discovery of what are the spaces that we like. What is our strength? We have done security and enterprise selling. What can we build? What are the pain points of today's developers? What's happening around in the market? So we went through this. We had 3 ideas that we narrowed down on. Then we dig deeper into each of those 3 ideas and found this to be the most exciting one. So I'm a big believer. I think the understanding the market, understanding the customer, and doing that discovery is critical. So I think this was one is like, talk to enough people, found this a hard problem, go ahead and solve it.
How long did it take you to? I mean, was the idea already in your head for a couple of months?
No, I think that was almost a three month process to kind of go through this and discover this.
And was it you alone doing this, or did you?
No, guys. I think it's always a team thing. I have, as I mentioned earlier, team first, founding team. Also, I think working in a team setting for this is critical because variety of opinions matter.
Right.
And I think that's what I really like. Is like you have people who are not going to believe in it. They're going to bring in a contrarian perspective, and that's important because otherwise you could create your own echo chamber and says this is the best idea. Talk to all your friends, says amazing idea, and then you'll end up with something that you think it's amazing, but the rest of the world doesn't.
So when you're putting together that team, that founding team, how do you constitute this? How do you think about, okay, hey, do I need like engineers, designers as well? Part of the process would be just you and your co-founder with complementary skill set. How do you?
I think in this case, since we had worked together, for us, it turned out we had a team. But in this team, there's enough variety, which is what I mentioned, right? So we have somebody who has led customer success and large teams of customer success and small team who is very hands-on as a technical person, but still passionate about the customer experience. Then we have an experienced product leader. We have some of the best engineers who can say, hey, to create this differentiated, creating this big, what technology layer do you need to build? What is the architecture? So yes, we had a huge diversity from that thinking perspective, and me being passionate about go-to-market, how will we crack this? So I think, yes, think of diversity, and if you don't have the diversity or the variety of these experiences within the team, go engage with advisors, go engage with people. I think one of the things I felt in the Demisto journey and even now, it's like if you reach out to people, people are willing to give advice, right? Like for advice, for engaging, there is resources. So reach out.
The second time around, Rishi, has it been anything? Has anything become easier? Because I know definitely some learnings from the past. So, some parts of it would have become easier, but some things don't change, right? If you could, help us understand both parts of this journey.
So yeah, if it was easier, then it would be not fun, right? So I think that start is like, as I said, we did it for the challenge. No, but I think definitely, kidding aside, there are certain things which are easier. One is fundraising is easier. You have credibility. People believe in you. Uh, Second, you do develop, I mean, you build on your experiences you asked earlier, right? I think so. There are certain things that you start intuitively to understand that this is not going to work well. This is not going to go well with the customers. Uh, so some of those decision making becomes easier. But I think in the other sense, I feel uh, you should make it challenging on yourself to go to the customers yourself. Even though you could afford to hire, go do that early customer discovery yourself. In fact, go to customers who you don't know of or who are cold reaches and get those customers, because you want the true feedback rather than the biased feedback. So I would say fundraising is easier, but other than that, I think it's still the same process. And I think the more genuine that process is, because you went back to zero, the stronger your product and your company will be. That's my true belief. Because otherwise, it's not going to be, and you're going to hit that roadblock at some point of time. You'll get your early customers from previous company adopt you, and then what?
Yeah, that's a great point. Rishi, you mentioned fundraising, and I think probably in this market, this is on top of every entrepreneur's mind. Y'all have raised one of the largest seed rounds. Can you share a little bit more about how that journey was? Did you go out in the market thinking you will need this much money, and was that planned for, or was it you being a successful first-time entrepreneur starting up the second time? So you had multiple different options. If you could just walk us through what you were thinking.
So a little bit of both, Suhas. I think the one, we knew that the problem we are tackling is a big problem, broader problem. Thinking of managing customer as identity, you need to build an infrastructure which is global, highly available, secure, all of those, right? So we knew that this is a hard problem. We do need to raise, to hire the best and build the best. Two, um, it so turned out, being second time founders, the fundraising, we had multiple options. We had the best investors who wanted to believe in us and wanted to well capitalize. So a little bit of both. But I think the way to think about how much to raise, the advice I'll give to founders is define your next milestone. What is your milestone? Is your milestone 10 POCs that will be there? Is your milestone, I'm going to have 200 customers in production? It could be different milestones based on the company, based on the product, based on this. And that milestone needs to drive. That is when I can say that I have achieved my goal and my next goal, and that is the next funding. So I think define that, work backwards. What does it take? And that is the right amount to raise. And raise more than less. Don't worry about dilution. That's been my mantra, which is startups need to be more capitalized because things will go wrong. Something will not work.
Yeah. And you need that room for experimentation, right? Like, yes, if you have exactly that runway. Rishi, here's a curveball for you. You were probably in a position where, lots of this came to you, right? Because of where you put yourself in that position post these many years. If there was a founder, thinking of a similar problem statement, but early stage, right? The founder probably isn't in the same position. So by that, I mean, has probably less capital available. What would your advice be to them?
For the same space? That is indeed a curveball. I think my advice to them with less capital, same space, trying to solve the same problem is find very small niche to wedge into the market. See, the way I think about the product markets is there is new categories and there is established categories. We are in an established category. When you are going after an established category, then the only thing that matters is how you're going to wedge in. Mm-hmm. When you're building a new product, then I think is you have a small enough pain point and then you're going to grow that pain point and the customers will go from there. And wedging in, you can either go in if you are well capitalized to say, I'm going to go replace this particular thing, or I'm going to do this, where you can spend in marketing, spend in other things. But otherwise, a less capitalized product, you need to find a very strong wedge in. And the wedge in needs to be a non-displacement strategy, sit next to the existing product and go expand from there. So that would be my strategy, which means a stronger product discovery, because especially in our space, and I think this is, I will say out in the open, there are some good products. There are some very strong players like Auth0, which have done very well. So we are challenging them and building a better product at a better cost effectiveness, serving the largest of the largest customers at this point of time. So I think that's a daunting challenge, and doing it with less capital means you need to really find a very strong wedge.
Perfect. Thanks for that. We mentioned earlier we will go deeper with you on the metrics bit and how you get closer to matching both your product and your market. So now, like you spoke about Demisto in the retro, giving us a picture there. Now with Descope, how do you plan forward? Right, like you're in that phase where you're getting your early customers on board. You've built out your early product. How does the journey from here to getting to product market fit, as we say, what does that look like for you? How are you planning for it?
Yeah, I think the way, again, as I said, right. So the plan is evolving. It continues to evolve. We have come a long way. We launched in February. Let's say 6 months ago. In the 6 months, we have got some amazing traction. Some of the best startups who have launched using the product, building their authentication and user management with us. So crazy traction. Also interesting in today's world, which was surprise to us, is traction worldwide. India, Israel, Europe, US, Australia, companies from wherever, because that's something you can achieve in today's world, right? You can actually really do the right job digital marketing wise and get users from worldwide. So we have got that motion, which is doing extremely well. Really strong adoption, traffic, feedback, everything. The next step is, how does this grow to the larger customer base? And that also, I think, different go-to-markets, different sales motion, and we are seeing some crazy traction of the largest, tens of billions of dollar companies using the product to solve the customer identity problem. From my perspective, the product market fit really is about, as I said, find the market and build the right product from the market. We are claiming the market for us is from startup to mid-size enterprise, not the largest of the largest. I'm not going to go to the largest of the banks there, right? So mid-size enterprise to the startup is the right market. Still a very big market. That's like covering a large segment. Building a product for that entire market is the goal, and we believe we have it. And I think that is where the capital comes in. I mean, we're in a fortunate place to get more capital, hire the best engineers, build the best team. So now I think we're starting to see all the right signs. Now it's grow the go-to-market side of things.
Is there a playbook to getting your first 50 customers on board, say first 10 customers? Have you done something like you mentioned, there's great traction across different markets. Is there a structure to this if someone else in the B2B space looking at SMB mid-market segments? Yeah,
so I think definitely there is some guidance. I would not use the word structure. Structure is too rigid in some senses in this early stage. There is a lot of discovery. There is a lot of growth hacking, or whatever you want to call it. But yes, so let's touch upon few of the things, right? And I think at this point we are way beyond the first tens of customers. We are in hundreds of customers. But I think the point is, based on the segment, when you're going after smaller customers, there you need to make sure, find where they are. What are they searching for? So I'm a big believer in inbound marketing, content, messaging, SEO.
Nice. But that takes some time to set up, right? It takes
some time. But I think that is where I say start early. While you're building the product, we started on it while even the product was being built. If you could invest in that, and by the way, it's not just us. I have some startups who I help, I've invested in India. they hire their first marketing hire when they hired their first engineer. Right? If you could afford, that is very important, because that marketing hire is building content, understanding your customer, understanding message, and that person is not your typical marketer. It's like a little bit who can go figure all of these out. But no, that is a big believer. So because like, how do you get the attention of uh, today's startup which is building? You need to know what they are searching for. Are they finding you on top and getting to engage with them? But make the process for them. What do I mean by process for them? A lot of these companies that are working with us don't want us to call them, don't want to disclose who they are, want to use their Gmail addresses, and I'm okay with that. If you look at our process here, it's like, you be you, the product is available, it's open for you, use it, try it, and if you see the value, then contact us back. But at the same time, on our end, structure wise, I want to track the activity. Why do I want to track the activity? Because let's say everybody just signs up and nobody moves down the funnel of using and implementing the product. That's a huge problem. So that's where I meant was like, there's some structure or there is some recipe to it. So that's my go to market for that segment, which is let people sign up, make it self-service, make it easy, they go through it. So a lot of work at Descope has gone into that part. Then for the mid-size enterprise, the funnel is completely different, where reach out to customers, find the right persona, interview them, go engage with them, go start the POC with them, see the response from the POC, and then start that process. And that is a high-touch process, more engaging process. So based on who you are selling to, what you are selling, it will change. But define it, define your path, and go through that motion.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Rishi, from operating to founding, and we know you've been actively involved. I know lots of startups reach out to you for advice, for early stage investments, and you've been engaging with a bunch of them. Have a couple of questions around this, because the word angel investing probably has become very hot in the market that was very liquid over the last couple of years. Two questions here. How has your learnings been over the years, right? And why I ask this is, there are always two schools of thought that our community has voiced about. One is when operators back operators, and I think that's a great the way market has evolved. That's amazing. But the other school of thought is also, I think founders also need to focus on what they've raised capital to build for, and that focus is super important. How do you find a balance between the two? Which school of thought are you in? And then we'll go deeper into some of the learnings.
Yeah, I think I would put myself in the camp where I do angel investing, but I'm doing angel investing not for the investing sake, but for the sake of staying in touch with great founders and learning what's happening in the market. Right? I mean, that's kind of been the goal. So it's like, I had the opportunity to go do investing 100% of the time and not starting with Descope. That's not what I chose to do, right? So I think with that in mind, where my goal is to more stay in touch with what's happening in the world, engage and invest to be closer to the operators, closer to the other founders, and in fact, learn from them. There's a couple of companies which are doing certain things which I am adopting here back at Descope. So with that goal in mind, I think there needs to be a balance. So I would say I am very selectively investing and only investing where either I can learn or I can help. For example, I'll take an example. Multiple people approach me. We are doing something in the space of music and this or medical. So one of the most common ones, like I guess, like, hey, is a medical startup doing this with machine learning and medical. It's like, guys, I have no idea. I don't understand this. I cannot help you. I cannot even judge what you're doing is good or not good. So when I don't understand that persona, I'm not going to be able to help you. So it's going to be really dead money that way, right? I can invest, but then what am I doing? So I stay away from that. And yes, of course, as an operator, I'm a fundamental believer is founders need to spend every working minute that they can on their product, because that's the biggest ROI. And that's what you signed up for if you're passionate about what you're building. So I think there needs to be a balance, but at the same time, I think this is what I said. Don't be is like the whole concept of Koop Manduk in Hindi, which is the idea is like just don't be in the well, a frog in the well, to very, very narrow. It's okay. It's engaging. Investing helps me learn, helps me see what's happening out there. And that's kind of definitely, even being a founder and operator at Descope, learnings from those engagements I can bring back.
Do you remember the time that you wrote your first angel investment check? Like, how did you get introduced to?
That was totally because a friend needed help. That was actually.
What year would this be in, just reference?
It's a good question. I think it was probably 26, 2015, 20.
Almost.
Oh no, probably even before 2015. I think 2013, 24, almost a decade ago. That's actually, I've invested even in the second company of the founder now, Indian founder Vijay. Vijay Rayapati, Atomic Works now, and then previous one, different names, right? They started with the Bot Metric was the previous name. So no, that was because they came to me, had the product idea. It says, we need your help. We are starting this. I like the idea. It says, but you need to help us with the product thinking and this and that. Spend a lot of time, because back then again, I had a lot of way to influence the product, wanted to help. Amazing journey. So that was my first one.
Okay. And over a decade now lots of people in our community, senior operators, want to get into angel investing, again from a similar mindset that they want to help. And we've also seen founders later in their journey, Series B, Series C, contribute back. But there are lots of learnings, right? I think in a market where you see so much liquidity, they probably have invested in the last 2 years, but angel investing teaches you over 7 years that you might get lucky with a few. How's that journey been? Any learnings for people just getting started on the angel investing side?
I think again, same fundamental principles. I think I'm the more I'm learning is the following, and I think I've now had more learnings in the last 5 years of slightly more actively investing. Before that, it was very, very rare. Is if you're on the fence, don't invest. Because I think then you're truly trying to get lucky. And even if you miss out because you didn't invest and you were on the fence, it's okay. Because again, for me, it's about that connection. It's about that passion. Can I help it? And if it is not in your domain, I don't invest. Because if it is purely about investing for the returns of investing, I think from a risk-reward ratio, there are better places to go invest and make money.
Sure.
So you really need to feel that you can add the value or judge the space really well. Like security space, I can judge the space really well. I know what are the right characteristics, so I can help. So my success in the security space is going to be higher because I know about that space and I keep learning about that space. So in the journey of the company, I'll be able to help them as well. So I think that's kind of my advice, which is pick a space, go deep into it. I mean, unless you are an investor where this is your job as investing, that's different.
That's very different. Yeah. So I think go deeper into the subjects that you know best, because I think that there your conviction will be a lot easier. And yeah, I think like you said, wait it out a little bit, right? Don't be in that FOMO of missing out. There will be opportunities that come your way. I think lots of learnings that we've covered so far for founders, for operators looking on both the investing side. But to end this discussion, I think one very interesting section that we left for the end was career paths for operators, right? I think one question, especially in a market again like this, for people in our product community has always been, okay, hey, how should we think about our careers as well, right? So is there a framework? I know you worked across early stage startups, you've grown down that career ladder and then started a company. Was there a framework? Was there a conscious decision while you were making your next jump, or did it come through? How should people?
Yeah, I think this is the only framework I'll tell you is every time you are thinking about this, check yourself whether you are thinking about this because somebody went through a progression which is what you're trying to imitate, or is this really the progression you want? And I'm telling you this because the further I get in my career, the more I realize that there are multiple paths to success. Right? I have seen people who went early on into a startup and then did acquisition, left, another startup, acquisition, left, another startup, acquisition. So that's a perfectly fine path. And people have done that. And I have friends who are doing really well in their career because they get to known as the leader that a startup hires to grow. Then I have friends who stayed 10, 12 years in a large company, got to the VP, SVP stages in a large company. Perfectly fine career path to have. And then there could be founders who start on early, and in the very first one, they make it successful. Then I have friends who have tried 3, didn't work, and the 4th one became successful. So I think I'm a firm believer there are multiple paths to success. Each of these paths take a different mindset. I will not say skill set, I'll say mindset. So when you're thinking about your career, your path, what you want to achieve, think about the path you want to take, not because somebody else took that path, because there's a lot of different paths. I mean, that I think is a very important feeling because I went through the journey leaving Intel in 2015, where I was a GM on a very different, comfortable situation. That is the question I asked because I could see people around in large, successful software companies, and you could go and build that out. And that's how you can end up becoming a CEO of a large company and run that large company versus jumping into a startup and doing that. So there's no right path. And I went through that path, like what will excite me? What will I do?
When you were at that crossroad, how did you make the decision? Because there was this path, like you mentioned, a very logical path and that set up for you. But and it's a very comfortable position, right? When you're a GM of a large company like that, it's very difficult to move out. Right?
It was a very personal, emotional decision, primarily driven by I really wanted to build a product and launch it. And I struggled multiple times in a large company to build what I want to build and launch it and take it through the go-to market and sell it. And I could not. So I think it's like innovator's dilemma was the number one reason for me to jump ship. That's how I would define it.
Yeah.
And for the first year in Demisto, it was always that feeling, which is it the wrong financial choice? And by the way, in most cases, it may be the wrong financial choice to start a startup. So I think that was, again, sharing personally, that was the thing which is, it was that innovator's dilemma. And the mindset was very simple. It's like, let's give it a shot for 4 years. If it is not the path, I will always go back. And then it'll be a career and a job rather than a passion. But that's how I thought about it. And there are people who's completely different. They say, I cannot take a startup, the uncertainty, the unknown and changing every day. Yeah. And they really want to grow. They have very strong skills to understand people management. They want to grow in a large company. And that's okay.
Which is okay. Right? Like you mentioned, I think different paths and most of these paths are correct. There's no wrong here. Do you think somewhere, having worked for those many years, that financial stability helped you make that decision? Or do you think we see lots of people even early in their career startup, but then for them the challenges will be different, right? I think do you somewhere feel some amount of financial stability helps you build? I'm just trying to think from the retro at that point of time, because on the other side also it's challenging. Yeah. Yes, there is less opportunity cost over there on the other side, but
depends on how this becomes very tricky. It's very, because see, on one hand, yes. But on the other hand, you get further in your life, you have more responsibility. So it becomes harder to take that chance. Very personal, but I think, yes, the fact that my wife had a very stable job, a good job, did help me say, okay, let's stop the income for 2 to 3 years, and I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. So yes, I felt comfortable. But I think I have seen situations which is, as you further in your career, that decision become harder and harder if you put financial as the driver, which is why I said, for me, it was like, okay, I really want to build something. And I've not been able to build something. And I want to try to build something. And I was like, okay, let's make the jump.
That motivation pushed you
Pushed me over the edge.
more than the finance. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Rishi. Before we jump into our fun rapid fire section, one question that's less spoken about is I think mental wellness for founders, right? Founding journeys are very, very stressful. How have you been able to balance work and personal life? Is there something that you figured over the years? I think initial years would have been a lot harder. We were putting time, but is there something that you figured out in your? How does your day to day look like? Where you're able to, if you're able to,
If is the good question. It depends on who you ask. If you ask my friends, my wife, this says, no, I have not, but I feel I have. No, kidding aside. I think, by the way, still, even with the second one, they tell me I am zoned out. I am not present in those social settings. But no, I've made a conscious choice. And I will give this one to learning from my co-founders. And I have a story where it was early in Demisto days, two of us sitting in the office in Cupertino. I don't even call it an office. It was one room shared with somebody. And we had a big demo to early customer next morning. Nothing was working. It was 4 p.m. in the evening. Slavik gets up and says, okay, I'm going. It's like, where are you going? It's like, oh, I have a taekwondo class. So he's big into martial arts. It's like, what do you mean you have a taekwondo class? It's like, no, I have a taekwondo class. I'm going. It's like, and I was like, we were a few months into it. I didn't say anything. He left. And that was my first learning. It's like, okay, it's the part here I'm pointing out is there is this discipline of commitment. He has that commitment. Never mind, he went back 7 p.m. He comes back online, works through till 2, 3 a.m., makes it work. The demo went well. And I cite this incident as like, there is always tomorrow. Of course, you need to go out of the way to make things happen. But find that right balance. Since then, I think we have had this unsaid culture, unsaid rule. We are not working 8 p.m. in the evening, eating from the family time. In our office here in Indemista, people go back home 5, 4:35, 3:30 sometimes, have to pick up kids. But then we are committed back online at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., calls with Israel, calls with India, a bunch of India customers. So we put in the time because we are passionate about it, but we are also disciplined about striking the right balance with the family. But there's always a cost, guys. I mean, even my 10-year-old son says, when is your startup going to get over? He doesn't like, this startup doesn't get over because I don't want it to get over. But he has this question.
Yeah, no, I think this is the hardest part of. I think, but like you mentioned, I think there's that inner urge to building amazing products. I think if you have that motivation, then, and like you mentioned, everything has a cost, a trade-off, right? It is a decision you make. Sometimes one over the other, sometimes the other one comes over this. But yeah, just wanted to learn if there is a way you figured, but definitely not easy. But jumping into the most fun part of today's conversation, it is a rapid fire. We've got 3 very interesting questions for you. Kicking this right off, Rishi, whatever comes to your mind first. The first one that I have for you is, if you were to grab dinner with any personality across the world, whether from the present or in the history, who would you want to grab it with and why?
Okay, that's a tough one. Maybe a common answer. I'll go with Steve Jobs. And at the time when he was fired from Apple, or is the story was like fired or not fired, or did he leave? We'll leave it to that. But that's the time I would grab dinner and see what going through his mind, where he built something. It was doing well, but not well enough, and then he was going through a tough time. Went through all the other companies before he came back to Apple. I would go have dinner with him then to understand what's going on with him.
Outside of work, we know you love traveling. Is there a favorite travel destination that
I love traveling. We have done a lot of travel in the last 3 years. In fact, during COVID as well. Iceland was my recent favorite. Beautiful. I love natural beauty. So pristine, so accessible. It's just different.
Iceland. Oh, nice. That's on my bucket list too. Last one I have for you is if you could have the superpower of being omnipresent, what is that one thing or whose shoes would you want to put yourself in?
I think somewhat similar, omnipresent, but I think I'll take it differently. If I could do whatever, what would I do? I would clone myself, continue the life that I have today, as well at the same time go meet some celebrities or the bigwigs in the world. But I'm happy. I think I would continue my life, and then at the present same time, I think time is the biggest shortage that we have. Is how I say it. Is like, so continue my life because I'm loving this, but then also live a parallel.
Absolutely, I think that hits the nail. I think all of us would want more time in our day, right? Rishi, I think this conversation could continue for a couple of more hours, but thank you so much for your time today. I think this was fantastic. Lots and lots of learnings and lots of nuggets. We're gonna definitely reach out to you for a part two. Couple of months down the lane to see how the Descope journey has evolved, and definitely go deeper into your journey. But thank you so much for your time today. This was fantastic.
Absolutely love it, and amazing conversation. Some good questions. Thank you.